All new tonight, a push to get the governor to remove State Attorney General Ann Lopez from the investigation into a bribery case involving a state lawmaker.
Our chief investigative reporter Lynn Kawano explains why critics insist there needs to be an independent prosecutor.
The letter from the lawmakers, both attorneys, was hand-delivered to the governor's office. Republican Representative Kanani Souza dropped off a new letter to Governor Josh Green's staff Wednesday. Souza and Democrat Della Au Belatti have been outspoken about the process so far. They now want Green to exercise his authority to direct the Attorney General, Ann Lopez, to appoint an independent prosecutor to investigate the $35,000 exchange between an influential lawmaker and the lobbyist in 2022. Last week, the lieutenant governor came forward saying she has ties to the case, but insists she did nothing wrong.
It's too close to home. We need an independent investigation so that at the end of this, we can trust in the results and we can trust in that final determination.
The letter also states they want to meet with the governor to discuss how this can be done without interfering with the already ongoing investigations that have been initiated by Lopez and her Special Investigation and Prosecution Division, or SIPD. The letter cites statements made by Alexander Silvert, a former defense attorney who exposed the case with a petition last October. Silvert points out that Attorney General Lopez initially declined to take the case, but changed her position months later. That delay, he says, could have a big political impact.
Because we are running up against statute of limitations, and session began in January and ends in May, with elections coming up in August, with filing deadlines in June.
Lopez said in a press conference last Friday that the use of SIPD clears her of conflicts.
Is staffed with top prosecutors, experienced investigators, and analysts. They are charged with investigating public corruption.
Lopez also said the unit is already nearly a month into the criminal case, and the launch was delayed because the federal prosecutor only recently turned over the evidence that sent former lawmakers Kalani English and Ty Cullen to federal prison for bribery. The search for a third lawmaker only surfaced after Silvert's petition. Former Rep. Ty Cullen was interviewed by the Attorney General's investigative unit. Sources say he went without a subpoena. I'm Lynn Kawano, Hawaii News Now.